Welcome to part 6 of the Age of Progressive Reform. Now we're going to take a look at Woodrow Wilson. Now remember, Woodrow Wilson was the Democratic version of progressivism, right, during this time period. And in that election, like I said, you had 80% of the American public voted progressive. 42% voted for Wilson, 38% voted for Roosevelt, and the remaining 20% voted for Taft, who, like I said, was seemingly non-progressive. And that election of 1912 was a high watermark for progressivism. You'd already had the ratification of 2 progressive constitutional amendments under William Howard Taft, and Woodrow Wilson will see the ratification of 2 more, including women's suffrage, right? So Wilson is very progressive. He's from Virginia, right? So he's brought up with Southern values, but he's worked in the North. He was the president and dean of Princeton University, right? He was the governor of New Jersey before becoming the presidency. And the one thing that Woodrow Wilson definitely has going for him as far as his academic background is he does have a nasty tendency to believe that he's the smartest person in the room, no matter who's in the room with him. This is going to be a problem when we take a look at the end of World War I, but we'll get to that later. Right? Now, in foreign affairs, he is going to be very active. In fact, the Wilson presidency is often referred to as an imperial presidency. He's deeply moralistic, right? And so when he saw, for example, the president of Mexico get assassinated and taken over by militarists, Wilson's response to that, he says, we need to teach Latin America to elect good men, right? So in Tampico, Mexico, you're going to have a fight break out between U.S. Marines and Mexican militarists in April of 1914, which is going to be used as a justification for Woodrow Wilson to send troops into Mexico in what becomes known as the Tampico Affair, right? Wilson used them as a base of operation to send arms to the opposition and to wage war on the militarists who had taken over the nation, right? So he's getting involved in the Mexican and who is going to be governing Mexico directly. It's not the last time he's going to interfere with Mexico either. In 1916, he's going to send troops in again. A northern militarist leader by the name of Francisco Pancho Villa had been raiding into the United States, and on March 9th, 1916, he had raided into New Mexico and attacked the town of Columbus. The result of this is on March 15th, Woodrow Wilson is going to send 10,000 troops under the command of Brigadier General John J. Blackjack Pershing, remember him from the Spanish-American War, on a punitive expedition into Mexico to attempt to capture Pancho Villa. Now, they'll never do it, but a young lieutenant that was with General John Blackjack Pershing, a future general by the name of George S. Patton, will be with him, and at one point will at least come in contact with some of Pancho Villa's men, because he'll return from a scouting expedition with one of Pancho Villa's men dead and strapped to the hood of his car. Now, Wilson, like I said, was very moralistic, right, and very imperialistic, but he also had a dark side. Remember, Woodrow Wilson may have been the governor of New Jersey, but he was raised in Virginia, and so he has Southern values, and he's very racist, right? In fact, what he's going to do is he's going to introduce many reforms, but many of these reforms are going to be designed to actually make it more difficult for African Americans to get jobs, especially in Washington, D.C. For example, he required that a photograph be attached to all civil service applications for U.S. government jobs. And the reason why he did that is so that you could see what the person looked like, and so if the person was African American, you could just automatically reject it, right? He also called for and got the segregation of all government offices. So you have segregation inside of government offices, including offices inside his own cabinet, right? He supported the passage of laws in Washington, D.C. that made interracial marriage illegal, right? And in 1915, when a friend of his named Thomas Dixon had wrote a story that was turned into a movie by D.W. Griffin called Birth of a Nation, he couldn't wait to sit down with his friend Thomas Dixon and watch a personal viewing of it in the White House. D.W. Griffin produced Birth of a Nation and released it on March 3rd, 1915. The president will watch it on March 21st with his friend Thomas Dixon, okay? In this movie, Birth of a Nation, this movie is it's the first full-length feature in U.S. history, but it is all about the Ku Klux Klan. It's quite literally a promotion piece for the KKK. The KKK during this time is actually reinventing themselves. They had hired a PR firm out of Atlanta to help restructure their image and increase membership. And this movie was designed to kind of help that along, right? Now, in this movie, it portrays the time during a congressional reconstruction, right? And it portrays the freedmen as running amok, right? Running through the South and you know, burning and pillaging and raping at gunpoint and you know, just everything you could imagine, absolutely out of control, until finally the noble and altruistic KKK descends and gets the freedmen back under control. That's the storyline, right? Absolutely, especially if you watched it under today's lens, you would look at that and go, this is absolutely absurd. How was this ever a movie that got produced? But at this time, it was very powerful, especially if you were a Southerner like Woodrow Wilson. This is how Woodrow Wilson described the movie. He goes on to endorse it. He said, "It's like writing history with lightning, and my only regret is that it's all so terribly true," right? He absolutely bought into this storyline that was produced by the movie Birth of a Nation. Now, one little piece of irony in this, if you take a look at this one picture I have up here from the movie, one thing probably stands out a little bit to you. Take a look at that African American that freedman there that they're subjugating. Doesn't quite look right, does he? Well, he shouldn't. That actor is named Walter Long. Walter Long was actually an extra in a couple of the Laurel and Hardy movies, and he's white. He's in a makeup called blackface, right? Which today, of course, would be absolutely verboten for you to do, even in jest, right? But back then, this was pretty common. Why? Hollywood was segregated. There were no black actors. If you were black and working in Hollywood, you were probably sweeping a floor. Maybe if you were lucky, you were a carpenter's assistant. So none of these actors that you see, unless one of these guys is Dave Chappelle, none of these actors you see here are black. Any of the freedmen in this movie are all just white actors in blackface.